When it comes to teaching practice, there are three things that I've reflected on that I have been actively trying to do with the students that are engaged with each semester, which I do think may have some flow on effect through to the student evaluations of course and teaching. The first one of those is building a rapport. And I think that really starts from day one when you even before you actually have that first lecture, there's multiple touch points that you can have with students from the moment that you make your Blackboard course site available. You might have your welcome message, perhaps a welcome video to kind of introduce students to the course and bring them into that learning environment before you've even had the chance to meet them face to face in the room or in the Zoom, as it is the case with those of us who still do hybrid online teaching. The second thing that I've reflected on that I do is to actually build some student engagement and to raise the student voice in the course. And one of the ways that I do that by elevating the student results from previous semesters is actually in the first lecture or the first week of teaching to show students how I might have made some changes to the course based on previous year's feedback. Even if feedback is generally positive, it's really helpful, in my opinion, to show students where you're looking to innovate in your teaching. And it's a way to demonstrate to them your own passion for the areas that you might be particularly interested in outside of your core subject area that you teach them, the ways that you innovate in your scholarship of learning and teaching. And so you might actually show them at the start of the electronic course profile, and this is something that I have done previously and found that it worked well, ways that you've implemented feedback. And there is a section where you can add improvements that you've made to the course in the course profile at the start there too. And the third one is listening. So I know that at UQ, we focus a lot on continuous quality improvement. And certainly we have those ways of collecting touch points and data and feedback from students formally through, say, the Pulse survey or the mid-semester check. But I actually like to engage also on a weekly basis with the students. And I'm sure many colleagues do this as well, whether that be having time at the end of the lecture rather than just a full hour or 50 minutes of talking, but actually some question and answer time where students can engage with you, whether it be about the subject content or about an aspect of teaching or elevating their own learning styles and the ways they might be engaging with you as an educator. Yes, so when it comes to the CCAT results, I have in the past, in the first week of teaching and the first few weeks of the course, shared with students some of the qualitative feedback. I think a lot of times there is much focus on the quantitative number that we get, and we know as academics we can be numbers driven, of course, as well. And whilst that's important, I like to read and reflect on the qualitative feedback that's given by the students. And because I like to encourage further qualitative feedback from future cohorts, I put up some quotes of things that have worked well and areas that we can improve on and work on from previous feedback, of previous cohorts' feedback, and then use that as a way to kind of feed forward and build in improvements in the current course offering as I'm going with those students. Because I know one of the challenges probably from a student's perspective is they may reflect and think that their feedback is not going to be of benefit to them because they've already finished the course. But what I want to show them is that if they can engage with me as learners throughout that course, I can make adjustments here and there where it's possible to better cater to their own group of needs as learners. I absolutely think it's important to equip our graduates with exposure to workplace communication and professional etiquette, and the giving and receiving of feedback in a constructive manner is essential to that. Not only for the cohort that I teach in the UQ Business School as future business graduates and master's students, but just as a work skill and job readiness skill that all students can embrace, and use that way of engaging with their teaching staff to practice that. I absolutely do model and let the students know that this is a professional document that they can communicate their feedback to us as colleagues. And that in that manner and in that respect, any written words that they put there are digitally traceable as well. So that's really important. While surveys are anonymous, it's really important that I think students understand that the feedback is taken seriously and that we do read those comments and reflect on them. And when given constructively, it will help not only the person receiving the feedback, in this case, the educators at UQ, but the students who are practicing giving constructive comments. I do use some of the tips that are advocated by Italy. So sending out a reminder at the start of when the CCAP period is released, putting a Blackboard announcement and sending that as an email to students and flagging that. And the other thing that's really useful, which I'm sure many of us already do at UQ, is dedicating some time at the end of the lecture in the final week or whenever you feel it's best appropriate to actually give students a chance for feedback and to complete that task. But rather than just, for example, if it's a lecture, you might leave the room to give them some privacy in the days where it was all paper-based, or even if they're on their phones, you might want to just give them a moment where you don't feel like you're standing there watching them and they're watching you. Or if you're a Zoom educator and you've been teaching hybrid and you have a Zoom lecture, you might not just sign off, but actually just go into a breakout room or say, I'll come back in 5 minutes time. That's not the end of the session, but actually give them a signpost that you're going to re-engage and that it's not just, okay, well, we'll switch off and people go off and may not actually complete the survey. But I think if you sort of make yourself available either outside the physical room for 5 minutes or so, or in a breakout room in Zoom or something similar to that effect, and give students a few minutes just to complete that survey, that can be a really helpful way to build your response rates and feedback. There is probably a difference I've observed in terms of feedback. Yes, as you might consider, there's sometimes feedback that is surprising in a positive way, but also feedback that might be surprising in a way that you weren't expecting, and that has an effect on you as an educator that you might not be expecting to feel, which could be sad or frustrated, or perhaps your message didn't get through. That happens to all of us at different times. And I think one of the key learning points there is that as educators, we're communicators. We're not just teaching subjects, but we're teaching students. And if our message hasn't gotten through in some way for at least one person in the cohort, then that's an opportunity to reflect and consider, whilst we don't know who the student is giving the feedback, so we can't really connect it to how that student learns or their learning style or learning needs, we can certainly reflect on our practice to see if there's ways that we could be more engaging, more inclusive, or better responsive to different cohort needs.